What's going on, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Create This, where I pick an everyday object and show you step by step on how I bring it to life. In today's tutorial, I have with me a spork. This is a unique kitchen utensil that is essentially a hybrid of a spoon and a fork, and it used to be really popular, but I don't know why it never really caught on with the public. Anyways, I'm going to be mainly using surface modeling tools for this tutorial, so if you're new to Solidworks, don't forget to check out my beginner tutorial series, and I'll put a link in the description below. Let's go ahead and get started. I like to usually start by making sure that I'm choosing a plane that best represents my design intent. For this particular part that I'm making, I like to start by choosing the front plane to start my sketch. Once the plane is selected, I'll start a sketch by utilizing the 3-point arc tool. Now, the key here is to make sure that the sketch that you're creating best represents what the actual part would look like. I'm going to go ahead and dimension a sketch according to the physical measurements of the spork. There are a few ways you can do this. Personally, I like my handy dandy set of calipers that I use to obtain dimensions of parts. For now, I'll just fast forward to the end of the sketch. There you go. So these are my final dimensions of the side view of the sketch. Of course, this may vary depending on how long or tall you want your spork to look like. What I'll also like to do here is add markers by inserting points throughout the sketch. This will come in handy later when we're adding extra sketches to create a boundary surface, which I'll go over in a second. So I'm going to go ahead and dimension these sketch points so that they can act as guides when I'm creating sketch planes later. Great job! Once you're done with dimensioning, you may exit the sketch. For this next step, I want to add planes onto the sketch points which I've indicated in my first sketch earlier. You can do this by going to the Command Manager, clicking on the reference geometry icon, and then launching the plane tool. The next step is fairly straightforward. I'll begin by selecting the points where I want to insert my sketch. Start by clicking on the first point on the sketch. Solidworks will then prompt you to insert a second reference in order to fully define the plane. Since I want a plane to be positioned parallel to the right plane, I'll select the right plane as my second reference. You may choose to orient the model however you want it to make it easier for you to see how the plane is positioned. Once you're sure this looks good, go ahead and hit the green check mark to accept. Using the same technique, repeat this for the rest of the sketch points that you have defined. In the next step, we will create sketches onto these planes to define the shape of the spork. I like to think of these sketches as a skeleton of the object. The skeleton is what gives the object its form and sets the stage for creating a boundary surface later. With that said, I'll begin by clicking on the first plane that I'd like to start my sketch on. Click on plane 1 and then click on the sketch icon in the Command Manager. I'm going to go ahead and use the same 3-point arc tool that I used earlier. With the arc tool selected, start by placing the arc close to the first sketch. We'll make the necessary adjustments in a bit. We want to align the center of the arc to the sketch point by using the coincident command in the Property Manager. Once those 2 points are aligned, we want to make sure that those 2 endpoints are constrained horizontally. This is necessary to ensure that the spork is not uneven when you're drinking your soup. We'll go ahead and add a 1.3-inch radius to the arc. Great job. That wasn't too bad, was it? Exit the sketch when you're finished. For the second plane, I'll do the same as the first plane, except this time, I'm going to give it a different dimension from the first. Do the same as you did for the first arc by ensuring that you align the center of the arc to the sketch point, and then adding the same horizontal constraint to the 2 endpoints once again. I'll give it a radius dimension of 0.4 inches. By now, I think you're getting the hang of what we're trying to do here. We will duplicate what we've learned onto planes 3, 4, and 5. For plane 3, I'm going to give it a radius of 0.2 inches. Planes 4 and 5 will be the same as plane 3. Great deal. When you're finished, your model should resemble something that looks like this. What we're going to do next might just be the highlight of this exercise, and that is using the boundary surface tool. The boundary surface tool allows you to connect sketches or surface edges together, forming a surface feature that does not have a wall thickness. We will not be going into detail of how the boundary surface feature works, but I'll make sure to cover that in a future tutorial. Go ahead and click on the Surfaces tab on the Command Manager. If you don't see the Surfaces tab, simply right-click on one of the tabs, head to the Tabs menu, and make sure that the Surfaces option is selected. Click on the Boundary Surface feature to launch it. You'll be greeted with two distinct input options that you can interact with. Solidworks will then prompt you to enter the sketch or the edge you would like to begin your boundary surface modeling with. As a general rule of thumb, I like to select the main spine of the skeleton as my base direction. Under direction 2, that's where you'll select the rest of the bones that you've created earlier as sketches in the various planes. I'll go ahead and select the main spine for direction 1. In direction 2, this is where I'll connect the rest of the sketches together to form a boundary surface. Notice that when I click on the first quote-unquote bone, a boundary surface is formed. However, we want the sides of the surface to wrap around the remaining bones correctly so as to form the shape that we desire. This can be accomplished by clicking on the rest of the sketches subsequently to connect them together. And boom, there you have it. You've just successfully made your first surface model. Congratulations. Notice how this still doesn't look quite as complete, as it is still missing the curves and some other important features that define it. We can fix this by projecting a sketch onto this surface and then trimming it off to reveal the final shape. This can be accomplished by creating a sketch on a plane that's offset to this boundary surface feature that we've created. To do this, simply go to the Features tab, click on the reference geometry icon again, and launch the Plane tool. This time, we want to click on the top plane, and we want to offset it by 2 inches. When you're finished, hit the green check mark. We are now ready to start a sketch. Make sure that you are sketching on this plane normal to the surface. I'll start by drawing a construction line right in the middle of the sketch so that we can perform the sketch on just one half of the spork and then mirror it over. This will save us some time later. Again, I'll be using the 3-point arc tool to perform this sketch. To save you some time, I'm going to be fast forwarding this clip to the end of the sketch. After completing the sketch, you'll notice that our sketch has exceeded the bounds of the initial surface model that we created. We need to fix this so that when we're trimming out the surface, you'll not run into any issues. You can do this easily by going back to the initial boundary sketch and adjusting the first bone that you created. Making changes throughout the design process is perfectly normal and should be seen as a learning opportunity to continue refining your skills. We'll grab the endpoints of the first arc in plane 1 and extend them out slightly. That being said, you can also add a dimension to it to fully define the sketch, but I wanted to preserve the flexibility here in case any changes need to be made. Now, let's return the sketch that you created to check to make sure that the problem is fixed. Great job. It looks like you were able to fix the problem. Now, the next thing I'd like to do here is begin mirroring the sketch to complete the outline. We can find this in a Command Manager by clicking on the Mirror Entities tool under the Sketch tab. Solidworks will then prompt you to select all the entities that you'd like to mirror. You want to mirror this about the center construction line that you had created. When you're finished, hit the green check mark. The next step that you may have already guessed is using the Surface Trim tool to trim this out. In the Property Manager, click on the sketch that you just created. Click on the Surfaces tab once again. Click on the Trim Surface icon. Make sure that the Keep Selection Radio button is selected. The software is prompting you to select the surface that you'd like to perform the trim action. Go ahead and click on the boundary surface that you created initially. You may choose to orient the model around to inspect a highlighted purple preview of what it may look like trimmed. When you're satisfied with what you see, you may hit a green checkmark to confirm. We are almost there, however, this still looks like a spoon. I'll walk you through how I add the fork tines to the surface model. Go back to the Property Manager and edit the previous sketch once again. For simplicity, I recommend sketching using the rectangle tool and then trimming out the individual tines. Place the first rectangle, then select the 3-point arc tool again to place an arc on the right end of the rectangle. Use the trim tool to snip off the excess. We will now give this rectangle a width of 0.08 inches. We'll select the sketch, copy it, and paste it 2 more times. Make sure that the tines are lined up by using the collinear constraint. Do this for the rest of the tines and then mirror it across the construction line to complete your sketch. At this point, I'm going to fast forward to the end of the sketch. Once you have completed the tines, we want to use the trim tool again to trim off the excess lines in order to complete the sketch. When you have finished trimming, you're one step closer to completing the spork. We will now use the thicken tool to wrap up the model. If you are unfamiliar with the thicken tool, what it does is that it turns a surface feature into a surface model. Go ahead and click on the thicken icon. The software will then prompt you to select the surface feature that you wish to convert. We will select the surface feature by clicking on it in the design area. We'll define the thickness as 0.03 inches. When you're finished, hit a green check mark. Finally, we will add the finishing touches to the model by adding fillers to the part. There you have it. I really hope you learned something in today's tutorial, and we hope to see you again in our next episode. If you like this content and would love to see more, please subscribe.